with having present all across the world with 60 countries, 85 offices across the world, and almost 1.25 lakhs man days we do in a year. More than 65,000 locations certified, and more than 2,500 auditors and experts across the globe. As an organization, the major stakeholder of DQS is DIN. We all know the DIN standard. There's also UL, which is Underwriters Laboratories, and the third one is DGQ, which is German Society for Quality. So these three are the major stakeholders. It's 27.78% market share, and followed by small stakeholders like Spectras, the Diadush, and JVI. These are the various associations which are working for the improvement of the quality. Some problem seems to be there. Just so we serve various industry sectors. Today we are talking about the railways, but other than railways, also the aerospace, which comes with the AS 9000 standards, the farm industry, the automotive, the education sector, the oil and gas, the chemical. You just take a name, we would be able to provide you the services related to that sectors. So more than 200 standards we provide in terms of certification, more than 25 industry verticals we serve, and more than 65,000 locations are certified by DQS. Now, if you look at the accreditation across the globe, we have a North American, Latin American, European customers across the world, and the accreditations like ENA, which is American ones, the DAX, which is German accreditation, the IATF, VDA again is a German one, UNIFI, which is exclusively for railway standard, that is European Association for Railway Network. And, apart from the general standard, if you look at the last column, transportation, the IATF, which is automotive standard, the IRIS, which is a railway standard. Similarly, for telecom, there's a TL 9000. Electronic industry, where the semiconductors are involved, there's a standard called electrostatic discharge 2020, and we are the pioneer in this area in the Indian market. For the medical, we also provide C marking and the QMS for medical like 13485. Similarly, for aerospace standards, the IT-related standards, the sustainability, we just take a name and then we'll be able to provide those services. We say that we are a pioneer in innovative solutions because the first word ISO 9001 and 14001 accreditation was taken by DQS. The first certification body for ISOTS, which is automotive standard, and VDA was taken by DQS. The first German CB to be accredited for medical packaging material standard, which is 15378. And the first IRIS certification worldwide was done by DQS. So that's a global footprint. But if you look at the Indian scenario, if you look at the Indian context, the first ISOTS auditor in India was from DQS, first telecom auditor, first aerospace auditor, first ESG auditor, first responsible care auditor, and first auditor for anti-bribery management system, which is ISO 37001, was from DQS. So we try to get to provide local services by sending the auditors out of India and getting quickly qualified them. And the only CP2 reviewer in India, and it makes a difference because we say that within 10 days of closing the issues, we are able to issue the certificate. So some of the customers which are certified for railway standard by us is Bombardier, the MCF, Raebareli, the ICF Chennai, the Siemens, the Rolls-Royce, the ABB, the Contitech, the SANT, which is a design center, the JETF. So similarly, the Phoenix Cantex, So the Amphenol, the GVE, the HIK, so these are the global organizations which are certified by us for IRIS standard or railway standard. Now we'll come back to the, so we talked about ISO TS 22163. Now, what is this ISO TS 163? And the IRIS first started in 2005, in fact. Uh, Used to be known as European standard for railway industry. And from 2005 to 2017, almost 900 sites were certified for IRIS worldwide. It always used to be considered as European standard. It could not get a recognition as an international standard. And that is what UNIFI realized. In 2017, when it was revised third time as a third revision, they made it as an international standard by releasing with the ISO committee, working together with the ISO committee, and releasing as this as an ISO TS standard. So therefore, the revision 3 is the ISO TS 22163, even though this is not the first time this standard was released. However, this is the first international standard released for railway industry in 2017 as a revision 3. And from 2017 till today, I was just trying to browse the number of sites which are certified. Within 3 years, the number has gone to 2064. So as of now, 2064 organization sites are certified for IRIS. So it has grown significantly. It has got very significant global recognition after becoming an international standard. So IRIS Revision 3 is a common global system for certification of the management system specific to the railway industry. And railway industry and railway supply chain, which is providing the component systems and subsystems to the railway industry. This is still a technical specification. When you say ISO TS, it does not mean it is superior or inferior than ISO. But what happens that any new standard when get released, there's a very democratic process of standard getting accepted by member countries. And if it does not get voting in favor of more than 2/3, then it gets released as an ISO TS standard. And with the hope that next time, 5 years later, when they again vote for it, and because of knowing the advantage of it, benefit of it, it will get a voting beyond 2/3, and it gets and it becomes the standard. So because it has been released first time as an international standard, it is released as an ISO TS 22163. So there are two part of it. The first part, if you look at the left-hand side, it is a standard. So a standard talks about the requirement which an organization is supposed to implement uh, as a defined requirement. So that's called standard. And below that, on the left-hand side, we say that IRIS Certification Conformity Assessment 2020. Now, this booklet below talks about the IRIS certification rules, wherein it contains that the certification process, how should be performed by IRIS approved certification bodies. It also talks about the assessment methodology to be applied by organization performance, a set of tools. And so this all comprises by this IRIS certification. So there are two agencies, you can say, which are working together for this standard. One is the ISO, which releases the ISO TS standard. And the second one is the IRIS, or called UNIFI, which controls the program in terms of qualification of auditor, how the audit should be done, the assessment sheet, where there are mandatory and optional requirement. This tool is an automated tool. So there's an auto audit tool, which is online, and that is controlled by UNIFI. And UNIFI also controls a portal called IRIS portal, which is a database of the organizations which are certified, their certification status, and also the scope for which they are certified. So it's also a very good tool for marketing. So if he wants to know whether a particular organization, if he wants to know if a company in India is whether they are IRIS certified or no, they need not to ask the company. They can just go to the IRIS portal, which is public portal, They can type the name of the company, and they will know whether the company is certified or not certified. The second advantage, I request you to please put yourself on mute if you don't mind. Yeah, thank you very much. So the second advantage is any buyer wants to buy any component or any category of component, he would straight away go to the country and then look at the organizations who are providing those services. So it's a very strong tool as a marketing tool, which helps the organization to differentiate themselves compared to the others. So the IRIS certification scheme, Revision 3, comprises two parts. One is the ISO standard, which is given as a green color on the left-hand side. The right, the certification rules. And this standard, this program is controlled by technology tools, where the audit tool is there, which comprises the information of the customer, which is controlled by customer for information, because you have to fill this your company information on the portal, and that company information automatically get transported to the tool and to the your certifying organization, and the tool is used, and we provide your findings and gets uploaded. So the same tool is being used by the customer, by the auditor, and by the Unifi. So there's a portal and there's a database. So this is the overall scheme of IRIS. If you look at this, it talks about the global view of IRIS standard certified organizations. As on today, when we are talking, 2,062 locations are certified across the globe. So they are not the organizations, but they are site. So IRIS considers sites. Say, for example, in India, Bombardier has 2 sites, so it will consider 2. Alstom has 2 sites, it will consider 2 that way. So, and total 50 Indian locations are certified as of now. If you want to see the company like Fevli, also 2 sites are certified. So if you consider the number of companies certified, probably it would be 30, around 30 or 32. And the left-hand side, on right-hand side down, you can see the company detail. So on a portal, the name of the company, the number of employees in the company, the contact detail of the company, the product they are certified, it gets displayed. So it gives a visibility to the company in terms of the product and processes and also certification. The question comes that what is the scope of certification? Who can get certified for this IRIS standard? So the first one, design and development and or manufacturing or maintenance. For example, the fleet maintenance, refurbishment of component and overhauling or repairs of product for the rail sector. So this standard is very particular. If you see railway maintenance, there are organizations which are exclusively doing only for maintenance. Now this is not a planned maintenance, but this is a maintenance of the maintenance of the locos, maintenance of the railways.
Sir, your screen is not visible.
It's gone, disappeared. I was also surprised to see it is gone. Yeah, sorry for that. So
yeah, now it's back.
So this is like many organizations, you will find that like say for IATF, there is no certification possible for companies who do refurbishment and overhauling, but here it is possible. Similarly, there would be companies who are only doing design work, big players. In fact, they have an engineering solution provider. They are into design of design and engineering services of for the railway network. They can get certified. Similarly, companies who are into manufacturing, companies who are into maintenance, eligible for certification. So you will find many organizations who are only into refurbishment and organizations who are only into overhauling. They are also eligible for the scope of the work that they are performing. It applies throughout the supply chain of the rolling stock, signaling, and infrastructure related products. So railway, if you see, typically is divided into 3 parts. One is the rolling stock. The rolling stock means train, the thing which moves on the track. So that calls rolling stock. So anything and everything which goes inside the train, if a supplier is supplying to any of those components, then he is eligible. And if you see the railway, actually, it has everything right from tap till mirrors and till seats till fan. So everything you will find. So number of component and number of component suppliers which are there in the railway network are just actually in a big numbers, much more than typically we see in even automotive industry. Second is the signaling part. So signaling is altogether a different ball game here because that controls a lot of safety aspects are involved. Company who provide solutions for signaling are component for signaling, including software, including those infrastructure signaling related. Those gets classified as signaling. The third one is the infrastructure. So if your company is providing, say, track, so track comes as a part of providing track, or you are into civil construction of platforms, you are providing the ticket window, the gates which allows passenger to screen, then it becomes as a part of infrastructure. So if you put together all these things, right from civil work, electrical work, mechanical work, a huge number of supply chain is involved in railway network. The third point is that remote functions or site extension shall be included in the scope of IRIS. So uh, remote location, the company might say that I have a manufacturing plant here, but my office is in Mumbai or in Chennai, but the plant is in slightly remote location because the infrastructure or the space required is far bigger for that. It can be included as a part of a scope. Or if you say because of space constraint, I have some of the activity I have moved to the second plant. However, that plant is only being put up because the space was limited here. The item goes from here itself and comes back. That is called site extension, and that can be included as a part of the same plant. Because remote location and site extensions are not eligible for an independent IRIS certification. So if somebody says, I have a marketing office or I have a head office, I want a certification for head office alone, that is not possible. So therefore, there has to be included as a part of the certification with the site. If you look at applicability and scope of IRIS, we talked about that an organization which wants to go for certification, he has to be a legal entity. Starting from the right hand side top, the organization needs to be a legal entity. Then it needs to have an autonomous business management system. When we say autonomous, means the site or organization should be able to demonstrate that they are independently providing all these activity, right from the tendering and then designing or development and manufacturing and supply. If they say that certain activity are done by other location, which is where they are supporting, I'm not doing, but they do not want to include that, that is not allowed. So it has to have autonomous business management system to get certified. They need to do at least one activity out of design and development, manufacturing, or maintenance. They can do all three, but to be eligible, at least one activity has to be done by the organization. Uh, there are 20 scopes in IRIS, which is this IRIS you will find is a slightly different type of standards, more technical in nature. So there are 20 scopes are defined, which are based on the product. So whether you're supplying the signaling, so then you have a scope 18, you're supplying to say bogies and a different scope. So you have to be eligible for at least one scope because it does not give you general scope like design and manufacture of coaches. It doesn't give you that. It gives you particular scope. So if you say design development of bogie, so bogie will have a code, so it will come in as a part of certification. So you need to have at least one code to be eligible. Uh, Obviously, any number of code is welcome, but minimum requirement is one code. The 6 months data of record of implementation requirement. If you remember IITF, it talks about 12 months data. Here it talks about only 6 months data. Typically, when a company start functioning, start implementing actually IRS, it will take 4 to 6 months. So by the time you are ready for certification, you would have 6 months data. No partial certification or activities are allowed, which would hike weak processes. It means it is not allowed if you are suppose doing designing, but you say, I do not want to include design in my certification, that is not allowed. Or if you are doing commissioning, railway, the commissioning and installation is a big activity, because most of these players, they expect suppliers to not only supply the material, but they should also come and fit in the train. So in that case, the installation and commissioning becomes important. Somebody says, I do not want to cover that, that's not allowed, because whatever activities you are doing, it has to be covered as a part of certification. And finally, the three business segments which we talked about, it covers the rolling stock, it covers the signaling, it covers the railway infrastructure. So these are the 20 scopes which are there. So uh, starting with the vehicle body, vehicle fitting out, guidance, power systems, auxiliary systems, braking systems. And if you go down, 17 is a rolling stock, infrastructure, single rail component, special process work. So this is a broad category. However, there is a further fine category is also available. It's not opening. So there's also there's a list available that in the vehicle body, which component comes as a part of vehicle body. Similarly, for auxiliary system, what type of auxiliary system, like the compressors and other things which are classified as auxiliary systems, they comes as a part of this. So that's more of for the auditing perspective, when we go to the organization for the stage one, or when we initially contact, we try to see what components they're making, and then those component falls under which scope category. That is more from the auditing perspective or certification perspective, but it's important to understand this 20 product scopes. Now, many companies, like if you see the history of this railway QMS, we talk aerospace QMS, and the automotive QMS, IATF is called automotive QMS. They all these standards, the history of these standards are that they have taken ISO as a base standard. They have taken ISO 9001 as a base standard, and they realize that considering the type of business they are into, the ISO requirements are very generic and does not cover the specific requirement of that particular industry. Therefore, they want to uh, add on the requirements, and those requirements are some standard they call additional requirements, sector-specific requirements. Some people call them supplemental requirement, but in this IRIS they call supplemental requirement. So supplemental requirement is nothing but over and above the requirement of ISO 9001, which is appropriate, which is required for that particular sector. So if you look at this, now many people ask, they say, because railway, this is the first QMS, they ask, most of the companies are certified for ISO 9001. And the typical question is that we are certified for ISO 9001, how different this is, or how many times additional requirements are there. If you look at this picture, I think it makes it very clear. The first, the red ones. If you see the green requirements are ISO 9001 requirements. If you look at the green requirements at the top, which talks about 4.1, which is understanding the context, understanding the organization and its context, you'll find only green. There's no blue, there's no red. 4.2, 4.3 is only green. It means whatever ISO requirements are there, those are sufficient for even IRIS requirements. So there's no additional IRIS requirement there. But if you look at some of the other sections, say for example, you have look at any other section, say now if you look at 6.1 on the right hand side, 6.1 talks about actions to address risk and opportunities. You'll find green requirement, and you also find red, and you'll also find blue. So what are these three requirements? The green is the ISO requirement, red is the additional mandatory IRIS requirement. So I would use IRIS, but the meaning is ISO TS 22163. So as a short form, I'll use it as a as an iris. So you can understand I'm talking about the ISO TS 22163. So ISO 9001 says, say for example 6.1, they say you need to have a risk-based thinking. So IRIS additionally says you need to have a structured process for the risk determination, risk addressal, risk updation. It says a mandatory requirement. Now, what are the blue requirement? It goes one step ahead. It says as a should requirement that while doing the risk analysis, you should also involve your customers to understand the risk which customer perceives from its side. You should also involve your suppliers or other stakeholders to see whatever risk they see, which is very, which is a sign of very high mature system, and therefore the other blue requirements. So if you see the overall sphere or circle, this is overall ISO TS requirement or IRIS requirement. However, so the green ones are ISO 9001 requirement, red one are mandatory. So if you see the green compared to overall colors, it would be hardly 1/6. So you can even, it means you have to work 6 times more in terms of elaboration of a system. If you see compared to green and red, I think it will be 1/3 of that, between 1/3 and 1/4. So that's the difference. In short, if somebody says, so how much effort will be required? Obviously, for IRIS, 3 times more effort is required to get minimum requirement. For a company to get certified, it has to minimum meet the green requirement and red requirement. The blue requirements are optional requirement, and we will see it in the later stage. IRIS gives you a score, and if you want a higher score, higher quality level, then you have to also implement the blue requirements. But initial certification or say bare minimum requirement is you have to meet the green requirement and red requirement. You will also see some of the sections, say 6.4 is all red. There's no green. It means this requirement is not in ISO, which is called business planning. You would have also noticed that the only standard which is called BMS, which is called Business Management System, it is not a QMS. So you will find a lot of emphasis, a lot of involvement from the top management. So you need to have business plan, you need to have budget planning, and you need to have budget tracking. Now, all those things are a part of audit. So typically, every company does it, but it is not covered. It is considered out of purview of ISO 9001. Some people say this, even though indirectly it is there as a part of this, but here it is official requirement is that you need to have budget planning process, you need to have a budget review, you need to have budget updation, everything is a requirement. So business planning, full red means it is not a ISO requirement. Now, if you look at the 8.1, there's also 8.1 talks about more of a requirement management, which is not in ISO 9001 here. If you look at 8.9 or you say 8.8, you'll find RAMs and LCC. We'll talk it later, but that's again is not in ISO. The first article inspection, the obsolescence management, these are very, very specific railway industry requirement, which are not there in ISO 9001. However, there are some other requirements where additional requirements has been added in every clause. Say, for example, ISO 9001 talks about quality policy. IRIS additionally asks about the safety policy. Now, safety policy is not the health and safety policy. It talks about the product safety policy. So this way, everywhere you will find over and above the additional requirement, which is kept in view of the railway industry requirements. The structure of ISO TS 22163 is very similar like ISO structure, ISO 9001 structure. However, if you see the color wise, the red portions are additional IRIS requirement. So as an organization, you have to meet the ISO requirement plus you have to meet IRIS requirement. So if you see 4.4, it talks about QMS processes, and then the IRIS additional requirements talks about the requirement of documented processes. So there are 22 processes which are required to be documented, which is highest any standard which is asking. Therefore, these additional requirements have been added. If you look at the leadership, under leadership, the policy, the safety policy is the additional requirement. If you look at the 5.3, responsibility and authority of process owners is an additional requirement. When you go in detail, you will find a lot of new requirements. Similarly, the contingency plan and the process of risk management, 6.1, has been additional. The safety objective and safety policy is additional requirement. The business planning is additional requirement. And the 7.1 as a support process is a budget process. So budgeting process, how a company does a budgeting as a requirement. Then process of verification, calibration, organization knowledge, there are a lot of enhanced requirement compared to ISO 9001. I've been auditing for various standards, including I was also a telecom auditor. I'm also IITF auditor, also ESD auditor, but I had never seen any standard which is as exhaustive as IRIS is. And the organization knowledge is one of the best area which, if you cover all the standard, this is the most exhaustive in IRIS actually. It also talks about when a person joins and when a person leaves, how do you ensure that knowledge transfer takes place so that organization does not lose its knowledge. That type of maturity is there in this standard. If you look at the next page, now as you go to the section 8, you will find more of a reds than the white ones. So that shows you that what ISO requirement is in terms of 8.1, at least 3-4 times additional requirements is there in IRIS. Similarly, in the product requirement of the product, similarly design and development, similarly purchasing process, which is called EPPL, you'll find all reds. These are all additional requirements. The production, relatively, if you see, production has a compared to ISO, it is there, but compared to say IATF and other standard, the requirements are not very exhaustive. Look at 8.7, you will find all the concessions, the RAMS LCC, the FAI, we call first article inspection, the obsolescence management, the innovation management. These are all absolutely additional requirements. In 9.1, they also talk about the mandatory KPIs. So here standard has given mandatory KPIs which an organization is supposed to implement in the respective relevant processes. Internal audit, the auditor management, the first standard which talks about how do you ensure that quality of audit is appropriate. So it expects auditor quality should be evaluated audits. So you need to take feedback from audit process. So the high level of security that the process reviews, new thing which is not there in any other standard. So these are some of the so more of a pictorial review, you have got some idea about how standard requirements are. Now, if you look at the standard, first thing we have to keep in mind that what is this like sector, life of the week, the life of 25 years. Now, the automotive sector, so there is no life be kept because train needs to be maintained for 35 years. So we will talk about it later as we move on. So as a part of this today's presentation, more than the technical aspect of clause number, I'm trying to give an overview that how this industry works and what are the jargons we use in the industry, why those requirements have been built in, so that when you implement down the line, it will be easy for you to understand the context of those requirements. So the key supplemental requirements, there are many requirements, but some of the requirements I would like to just share to understand. Railway is a tendering business. You will find most of the cases the business has been awarded through tenders. The only standard then where there's a requirement of tender management. So how do you manage a tender? Now, how do you evaluate? How do you do the estimation? And how do you quote it? How the CFT is involved in that? So that's a big work. In fact, just for your knowledge, I would like to share I've seen cases because last couple of years I'm working very closely with the railway segment. Even the guys who are involved in bidding, They are not supposed to. Their phones are tapped. They are not allowed to move freely for the last 15 days, 10 days after the bid is done, or after it has been bid is applied. So because they do not want the competitor to know your pricing and your scope of work what you have applied for. So how we manage a tender, that's a very specific requirement of the standard. There's a clause for that. Second is the project management. Now, what is the project management? Other standards do not understand this the way it is taken in the IRIS. I always give example. It helps us to understand. The first metro project was Delhi Metro. The the cost of the each coach was 10 crore rupees. Now the recent one, the last to last month, the last bid which was open for Delhi and Meerut Metro, and the cost of the each coach is 7.1 crore. So you can understand that in the last 15 years, the prices have come down to 29%. And the cost of each commodity, whether it's a raw material, whether it's a labor charges or service charges or human resource cost, everything has gone up. How do we still, and this is a business. Every supplier, a company who is supplying it, they want to, it's a business, so they want to have a certain level of profitability, what they are expecting. So does it mean that 7.1 crore rupees coach who has bidded, Bombard has got this project, recent one. They would, and they only provided the Delhi Metro also with 10 crore. Does it mean that they will not be making, or they'll be making less profits this time? No. How do we manage this project with these many coaches, these many trains, and this is the cost? How do you still manage your profitability? How do you still manage the quality of the train? How do you manage the other performance requirement of the train? That is called the project management. So the project means you got a requirement, you got, say, you got a 10 bogie order. That's a project because you bid it for 10. Next time, again, next tender opens, a bogie, you don't know whether you will get the next order or not, one thing. Second thing, you do not know whether you will get the same price or not. So it's a very unique type of business where every time you have to look at the cost opportunities, cost saving opportunity, look at the how to optimize the various element of the cost and still be competitive with the quote, and you would also get the tender. If you would have seen that most of the time it is L1 and L2, maximum L3. It doesn't go beyond that. So they also have very set. Now L1, L2, L3 is maybe component level. Now in the train level, it is only one guy who gets the order. So how do you code the project where you get also the bid? You also get the order. You also win the bid. And then you also manage the cost and profitability. So that's called the project management, and very important. I would say most important element of IRIS, where they say how do you manage the cost, the project cost, the risk in the project, the human resource requirement in the project. Everything is very exclusively defined as a requirement and very useful. The third one is the configuration management. Now, it's very important that now if a train is running for 35 years, not 15 years down the line or 12 years down the line, you will find that say AC stops working or some other component stops working, and then you have to provide a replacement. Now, how do you know which 15 years back or 20 years back, what configuration was supplied that train? You would also not know that you also would not know how many changes have happened in the 15 years for that. The configuration management talks about more of a traceability, that which revision of part numbers or which revision of the particular system or subsystem is being running in which train, so that in case of any replacement is required, and then you can provide that. So that's called how do you manage the configuration right from starting till end. The next one is the RAMs and LCC. Why I'm asking, these things are not in ISO 9001, very unique railway segment. So you will find more of these words. RAMs stand for reliability, availability, maintainability, and safety. That's very critical. You would have seen that there has been collision of railways and the railway minister has to resign, because the people who are in the stake actually is the people, the passenger who travel in the train. The numbers are far higher. So safety is a very important element of the railways. Now, reliability, availability, maintainability, when the project is given, I'm just giving you every time because the mature project, Delhi Metro, the first project which was launched, data is mature, information is available, information available, so we can see that. Uh, Madam, may I request you to please mute yourself? Yeah. So when the project is given, say for example the Bangalore Metro, or if I say Chennai Metro, the project is given, they also give the requirement that what is the reliability of various components they want, what is the availability of a train they want. So availability means other than the downtime, when the train is available to fly. Uh, I've seen the detailed contracting of Delhi Metro. The target is 97%. So 97%, and in these projects, the 10% cost is hold on, and that is only paid if you prove your uh, if you prove that it is performing, giving those performance requirement in terms of RAMs and LCC. So let's say life cycle cost. So the point is, 10% of money is held up, and most of the companies, if you see, they say we work only on 10% profit only. If the 10% you do not get because of performance, then you have not got anything actually. So 10% is held up. Then when I was auditing that Delhi Metro project uh, to see how much it was running say 98.5% availability it was running. So that's how the whole business works. So you may be wondering sometime what are the quality requirements. So at a at a train level, as you know, as a rolling stock level, they have a target for what is availability, by what percentage availability they want, what is reliability of various components they want, what are the safety norms they need to have, what is the maintenance time, maintainability, how quickly you are able to maintain, replace the item, and then put it back in so that your uptime is more. So these are the targets given, and then most of these projects, it is 2 years which is run by these companies. They manage this. So if Alstom is giving a rolling stock set for Bangalore Metro, 2 years they will have to support them, and in 2 years they and in these 2 years they monitor it whether they are able to meet the performance requirement. So it's a very, that's why you will find the metros, the players who are into, and find the companies who are into very high-end companies, because the expectation, the requirements are also pretty high level of. And then the fifth one is obsolescence management. Now, we know that electronic component technologies, every 5 years there is a change. So if you have a floppy drive earlier, then CD drive, then you have a pen drive. Now what will happen similarly, the transistor resistors, the type of ICs was there earlier, the type of ICs now there. So how do you manage when the component itself is not available and the system comes back to you, or subsystem comes back to you as a breakdown? How do you replace that? So the obsolescence management talks about, you would have seen many news in the paper that government is giving upgradation project to this. What is this upgradation project? Similarly, for the technology upgradation projects also goes on. They are basically to manage the obsolescence management, because with the time you will find the technology has changed, upgraded, so system subsystem also needs to be upgraded. So and that is a part of obsolescence management. Now, the standard say requires 22 mandatory processes have to be. Now, when you say 22 mandatory processes, they need to be documented. People may ask what type of documentation required. Is it required only work instruction or process procedure? It's up to you. But 22 mandatory processes, which includes right from the risk management, budget planning, and followed by obsolescence management, internal audits, management of non-conformities and corrective action, management of RAMs LCC, first article inspection. These are processes. 16 optional processes are required. These optional processes are up to you whether you want to define these processes. And the difference is, if 22 processes you do not define, then it will be a non-conformity against certification or any audit if it is done as per the IRIS standard. These are optional things. You want to make your system further better, then you can have these processes. So you will find a lot of new terms and some terminology is used in the standard. Another new term is KO. They call knockout questions. K stands for knock, O stands for out. So what do you mean by knockout? As you see, the boxing knockout means you're knocked out of the ring. It means you're out. So these are 10 requirements. And if these 10 requirements during the audit, if we find the stage 1 or stage 2 or subsequently that they are not being met, however good your system is, your certificate is denied. The first one is you look at the risk management process. So how you implement and how you establish the risk management process. That's somebody says I don't have a defined process. It's not possible to move ahead. Competence management, project management, configuration management, change management, requirement management, and supplemental requirement in terms of documented process for the suppliers. We call EPPS. Special processes. How do you manage the special processes? And you will find a lot of special processes are here. Even riveting is one of the most technically advanced process, which is, so you may wonder why riveting is required, whereas you will find trains which are welded. So why welding is not okay and why riveting is required? Because in a high speed trains, you will find that welding doesn't work, it cracks. So they put riveting. So similarly, the riveting is a process. You also have heat treatment, plating, those normal process. So they expect in railway industry that special processes needs to be covered. The next one is the ranch LCC we talked about, and the first article inspection. So these 10 are we call knockout questions as per IRIS, and if any gap is found in that, then organization is denied for certification unless until they fix it. What is the process of certification? Again, that is a slightly different than normal process. There's an IRIS portal. The expectation of Unifi is that a company should go when they feel that I need to go for certification. They need to go to the IRIS portal, an IRIS website, and they have to register this. For registration, there's a one-time registration fee of 300 euros. So you have to go and register there. Now they're also clubbed with that conformity assessment booklet fee. I believe they're charging some 60-70 euros extra for that. But only registration fee used to be only 300 euros. Now it has become some 360, 370. Once you register yourself, you become a member. Then you have an option of selecting the certification bodies who are accredited for IRIS. So you have a drop-down menu where you can select the certification body. The moment you select the certification body in the portal, the information goes to CB that this company wants to work with you. They have selected you as a preferred certification partner. That's the language they use. Then CB will come to you or you contact CB, and then the commercials you close. And after commercials are closed and you are ready, then the stage 1 or readiness review is done, and stage 2 and registration audit is done. This is a very the standard requires a lot of patience, because it says even that before you go for certification, 60 days before, you need to submit the data of your performance. So 2 months before of your registration audit or stage 1, and 2 months before of every time when you go for surveillance audit, you have to submit your last 1 year data. As IITF is also asking, but IITF does not ask 2 months advance. So 2 months data you have to submit. The data will be analyzed by lead auditor, and then you will come for stage 1 or you will come for surveillance audit, whichever is due. So that's a typical process, which is and everything is done through the moment you then 60 days before when you submit the data, you have to go to the portal and then you have to put the date that I have submitted data on this date to lead auditor. So later on, iterator cannot say that you are submitted or not submitted. So you have to update in the portal. So Unifi knows every of your stuff. So they are controlling the program very, very closely. When the standard was revised in 2017, there were various stakeholders. Mainly this standard, all these sector-specific standards are driven by OEMs. So if you look at the IATF, all the GM, Ford, Chrysler, VW, they all are involved in development because the purpose is to improvement of the supply chain. Because most of the OEMs, they do only 30% work, 70% work is being done by supply chain. So the quality can only improve if 70% improves, otherwise they have only 30% in their control. So very same is railway. So you have Alstom, you have Bombardier, you have Fibili, all these guys, they came together for the development of this standard. So when they were talking about the revision, they said that there are companies who are having certificate, there are companies who are complying with the requirement, but there is no improvement in their quality. They say we don't see a change in their quality or change in their responses, even though they are certified. That was the first point came when the revision was being made and these points were discussed. So therefore, in this standard, you will find the focus on compliance is only one part. So the standard works on three parts, three pillars, and we will discuss this as we move to the next slide. Now, when you go for an audit, these are the information you have to provide before you go for the audit. Means you have to provide 60 days before this information to your CV. What is that? You have to provide your list of your processes and interaction. You have to provide your performance data, including who are your key customers, your stakeholder analysis, your customer perception KPIs, your customer feedbacks, your customer complaints, your warranty claims statistics. Then standard promotes the process approach through turtle diagram. The whole standard is divided into 5 main apex level processes. One is the project management, second is the requirement management, third is the control of externally provided processes, products, and services, and fourth one is design and development, and fifth one is production and service provision. So these 5 turtle diagrams, as you know, turtle diagrams, there is input output. 5 turtle diagrams along with the KPIs you have to submit to your certification body so that they see whether all these things are fine, and they will come with the preparation that which area they need to focus during the audit. So this is a pre-information 60 days before the audit you have to provide. So as I was talking about, this is a 3-pillar assessment. The first one is called compliance score, or called enabler score. So very exhaustive standard. Sometime when you look for audit, for example, ICF, when we do audit, we did 30 days of audit. 30 man days of audit was done for ICF. So why? Because even if a company says I have 10 employees, there are more than 420 questions in the tool, which each question you have to write evidences. Evidences are that we are complying or not complying, and if complying, what are the evidences of that. So this is called enabler assessment, and it gives you a score that how much you are complying with the standard requirement. So that's called enabler score, which tells you what percentage of a score depending upon how good your compliance is with respect to the standard. Now this enabler score covers both the green questions, the red questions, and the blue questions, as we talked about in the ISO versus ISOTS, that circle we talked about. So if you only score compliance in green and red, just bare minimum, your score will be around 60% only. If you want to score higher than that, then you have to also implement the should requirement, which are in the blue section. So against each clause, you will find some requirements are ISO requirement. Then which is inside the box. Then there will be supplemental requirement, which is the IRIS requirement. Then there will be should requirement, which are blue requirement. So this gives you a score of a compliance score, which all the other standards ask. Today, all the standards, whether it's for automotive or aerospace, every standard only talks about the compliance. And that score is called enabler score. Next two pillars are different here. The customer perception performance. Since customers said we have not seen a difference in performance of the company who is IRIS certified, they said, how do you score in those questions which are impacting the customer perception? So your score in the customer complaint, your score in the customer satisfaction, your score in the customer feedbacks, your score in the process reviews. So there are 10 areas which are directly impacting the customer perception in terms of performance. Your score is considered as this score. And the third is a process performance evaluation. For each process, you have a KPI, and KPI has a target. Whether you're able to achieve those targets, which are decided by your management, or it has to be in line with customer targets. If you're achieving those targets, you will get better score. If you're not achieving, you will get lesser score. So there are different categories. Whether target is achieved, not achieved, compared to last year, the trend is positive, negative, or stable. And if not achieved, the action plan is available or not. So it means the organization is evaluated not only on compliance, but also evaluated how effectively you are managing your customer related areas. And third, how your KPI performance, or basically the performance of those processes, are achieving the result. So you will find every IRIS audit, there will be 3 scores given to the organization. That's the first pillar. We talk about the enablers.
Sure. Please mute yourself.
Thank you very much. So now how the scores are given for the green point, the red points, and the blue point. The rating is from 0 to 4. So for each of these 420 plus questions, if you are not meeting the requirement at all, then it's a 0 point. It means the requirement is not met. In that case, it's a major non-conformity, and the re-audit is required if in any area you score 0 marks, means your requirement is not being met. If the requirement is partially met against each question, then you get 1 point, which is called poor, and it's a minor non-conformity. Then CAR is assigned, and you have to close this before you get certified. But you get 1 point. If you're meeting all requirements of the standard, all shall requirement, you only get 2 points out of 4, which says the requirement is met in full. So the question will come, how do I score 3 and 4? So 3 is a qualified requirement, means the optional qualified requirement is also met in full. And the optional optimized requirement also met in full. So the 5 levels are insufficient, poor, defined, qualified, and optimized. And if you look at the table below, that is, say for example, for each of this section, the requirements are given this, and there are more than 420 questions similar to that. So 4.1.1 talks about understanding the organization and its context. So the left-hand side, if you remember, I said ISO 9001 requirements are sufficient for IRIS. There is no IRIS requirement. So the first one is ISO 9001 requirement. So if you meet this requirement, it says the organization shall monitor and review information about external and internal issues, and you need to identify the stakeholders. If you're doing this, you will get 2 points. There is systematic gathering of information in place, then you get 3 points. And yearly update input for management review, and upcoming internal and external issues are incorporated in the company's strategy, and you get 4 points. Now, if you look at the 3 points and 4 points, it is not in the standard. This you get only from the tool, which is also available for customers, but you have to pay some 850 euros for that. Online tool is available. So, but we have to go and do audit as per this. So if you are meeting the IRIS standard requirement fully, you will still get 2, because in this particular 4.1, this requirements qualified and optimized is not defined in the standard itself. It is only in the tool. So this is how the enabler assessment is done, and the score finally is given. Okay, let's look at the customer perception performance. So these are the areas which drive the customer perception, which includes these areas: understanding the organization context, stakeholder analysis, customer focus, business planning, communication, customer satisfaction, management review process. They are indirectly impacting the customer. So your score in these areas gets reflected as a part of your customer perception performance. And the third pillar is your process performance evaluation. Now, process performance evaluation is against those 5 mandatory processes. So you will see on the left hand side below is a turtle diagram. So input, output, resources required, owner, the KPIs, risk associated. For these processes, you have to prepare turtle, you have to prepare KPIs, and those KPI needs to be cascaded down the line. KPI needs to be monitored, and we will review when we come for the audit meetings. When any auditor comes, he will review whether those targets are met or not met. If met, whether the trend compared to last year. If not met, whether corrective action is available, not available. So that's the additional analysis or evaluation of the company based on these 5 turtles are done. Now, you may also question that how do we know the process here, the performance is checked, the compliance is done or not done? This is done as the last activity. So by the time we do this, we also know the process complied or not complied, because we have covered process level interactions or process level reviews. There are 3. So this is a standard which not only gives you a score, but also gives you a different quality labels. So it is not like everybody is ISO certified or everybody is IITF certified, everybody is aerospace. Here there are different labels. So people will ask further, okay, what is your label? It's like people ask further, now if your son is, he say what percentage he has got. Today, if he has cracked the engineering, he'll say which branch he has got. So the expectation goes beyond. So the bronze level is the basic level. If your organization meets all the requirement of the standard, they get bronze level. The bronze level means all the green requirements and all the red requirements are met, fully met. The silver level means there's a higher maturity level is achieved by the company. It also says, if you see a lot of places they put, implies a transparency on performance. There were a lot of initially challenges for companies, for CBs to get data from the customer. Customers telling it's confidential, we cannot give, or we cannot show during the audit. If a company is not showing transparency, then they will never achieve silver. That's what the meaning is here. They have to submit the data 60 days before. If they do not submit the data 60 days before, then they are not eligible for silver level and gold level, irrespective of how good they score. So that is basically a first part which says transparency on performance. So they have to share the performance, they have to share the data 60 days before to be eligible for silver and gold level. Then during the assessment, a higher maturity level of ISO TS is mandatory. So we'll see in the subsequent slide what are the scores required if you want to be qualified for silver level and gold level. Gold level is even higher, and for all 3 pillars, you need to have a higher score and you need to have transparency of those information. These are the 3 quality labels, and these are the 3 requirements of these labels. If you look at from the left hand side, as I said, bronze level is just a threshold level. So you meet all the requirements of green and bare minimum requirement of the standard, you get certified. Along with the certification, you get bronze level. And it is issued after confirmation by a CB that the documented veto check was performed successfully. As you know, after every audit, it has to be veto checked. After that, if everything is fine, then certificate is issued and the bronze label is issued. The silver label. So what happened is initially when this program was launched in 2017, even though they did declare that these are 3 labels, but they did not open these labels. So as on today, when we look at the word label, they are only bronze label organization which are certified, because from 1st September, they have opened the silver label. So the organization which will be certified after 1st September of 2020, and if they meet a higher level of score, then they are eligible for that. So what is the eligibility level for the silver score? As I said, if you are meeting the bare minimum requirement, you get around 60%, 61, 62, around that, if you meet only the bare minimum requirement. But to get a silver level, the minimum score need to be achieved for all 3 pillars as below. The enabler evaluation, which is a compliance score, 70% is required for that. For your customer perception, you need to have 75%, and your process performance has to be 80%. If all these 3 things are not met, then you will not get the silver level. So there are organizations who are on a bronze level. They're asking us that whether you can support us to improve the system to the next level, where he said as a CB we cannot do this type of work, but the Karthi is going to cover in next session what considered role is. Probably he will cover this part. So this is not a, as we have all heard, the quality is a journey. So this standard gives you a journey, it gives you a score, and it also gives you a path that how you ensure that blue requirements or should requirements are getting implemented with the time and the system becomes more and more mature. The gold level, if you see, the minimum score need to be achieved 80% for enabler evaluation, 85% for the customer perception, and 90% of the process performance. So this is very objective evaluation. It is not like how many NCs are there based on that, how company is good or bad. Nothing there. The scoring is given for each question. Each question is evaluated based on 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which we saw earlier. Not meeting the requirement, partially meeting the requirement, fully meeting the requirement, exceeding the requirement. Based on that basis, the scores are given. And finally, the tool calculates the score automatically. So, and if a company has submitted the data 60 days before, and if he falls, if he gets higher score, then automatically, depending upon the score, they can be given silver level or gold level. However, in the first audit, a company can only get the bronze level. So IMC or Unifi has very clearly said that they will not give silver level in the first time to a company, because the first audit is a base audit. They also said that in a year, there cannot be special audit. Somebody says, can I, after 6 months, request a special audit and can get qualified for the silver level? It is also not allowed. So you have to wait for 1 year. If this year you have a certain score and you want to achieve next level, you have to wait for next audit, which could be surveillance audit or recertification audit, and then that audit only you can get a score, new score, and based on that basis you can be given a different label. So that's all from my side in terms of IRIS or ISOTS 22163. There are a lot of things, but I just try to keep it more practical so that once you go through the requirement, once you go through the standard, I think you'll have understanding why this requirement has been put in. I would request now my next panelist to take up his session, and then at the end of his session, we can take up the question and answers together. Over to you, Karthik, please.
Thank you, Mr. Girish. Thank you, Mr. Girish, for the wonderful session on the requirements of ISOTS 22163 and the certification process and the major requirements